and which no explanation can render palatable. They make him show contempt and curl up the nose at Ophelia's father, contempt in its very grossest and most hateful form, but they get applause by it. It is natural, people say. That is, the words are scornful and the actor expresses scorn, and that they can judge of. But why so much scorn, and of that sort, they never think of asking. So to Ophelia. All the Hamlets that I have ever seen rant and rave at her as if she had committed some great crime, and the audience are highly pleased, because the words of the part are satirical, and they are enforced by the strongest expression of satirical indignation of which the face and voice are capable. But then, whether Hamlet is likely to have put on such brutal appearances to a lady whom he loved so dearly is never thought on. The truth is, that in all such deep affections as had subsisted between Hamlet and Ophelia, there is a stock of supererogatory love, if I may venture to use the expression, which in any great grief of heart, especially where that which preys upon the mind cannot be communicated, confers a kind of indulgence upon the grieved party to express itself, even to its heart's dearest object, in the language of a temporary alienation. But it is not alienation, it is a distraction purely, and so it always makes itself to be felt by that object. It is not anger, but grief assuming the appearance of anger, love awkwardly counterfeiting hate, and sweet countenances when they try to frown. But such sternness and fierce disgust as Hamlet is made to show is no counterfeit, but the real face of absolute aversion, of irreconcilable alienation. It may be said he puts on the madman, but then he should only so far put on this counterfeit lunacy as his own real distraction will give him leave, that is, incompletely, imperfectly, not in that confirmed practised way like a master of his art, or, as Dame Quickly would say, like one of those harlotry players. I mean no disrespect to any actor, but the sort of pleasure which Shakespeare's plays give in the acting seems to me not at all to differ from that which the audience receive from those of other writers, and they being in themselves essentially so different from all others, I must conclude that there is something in the nature of acting which levels all distinctions, and in fact, who does not speak indifferently of the Gamester and of Macbeth as fine stage performances, and praise a Mrs. Beverley in the same way as the Lady Macbeth of Mrs. Ayres? Belvidera and Callista, and Isabella and Euphrasia, are they less liked than Imogen, or than Juliet, or than Desdemona? Are they not spoken of and remembered in the same way? Is not a female performer as great, as he call it, in one as in the other? Did not Garrick shine, and was not he ambitious of shining in every drawling tragedy that his wretched day produced, the productions of the Hills and the Murphys and the Browns? And shall he have that honour to dwell in our minds for ever as an inseparable concomitant with Shakespeare? A kindred mind! Oh, who can read that affecting sonnet of Shakespeare which alludes to his profession as a player? Oh, for my sake do you with fortune chide, the guilty goddess of my harmful deeds, that did not better for my life provide than public means, which public custom breeds. Thence comes in that my name receives a brand, and almost thence my nature is subdued to what it works in, like the dyer's hand. Or that other confession. Alas, 'tis true, I have gone here and there, and made myself a motley to thy view, gored my own thoughts, sold cheap what is most dear. Who can read these instances of jealous self-watchfulness in our sweet Shakespeare, and dream of any congeniality between him and one that, by every tradition of him, appears to have been as mere a player as ever existed, to have had his mind tainted with the lowest player's vices, envy and jealousy and miserable cravings after applause, one who, in the exercise of a profession, was jealous even of the women performers that stood in his way, a manager full of managerial tricks and stratagem and finesse, that any resemblance should be dreamed of between him and Shakespeare, Shakespeare who, in the plenitude and consciousness of his own powers, could with that noble modesty which we can neither imitate nor appreciate, express himself thus of his own sense of his own defects. Wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope. I am almost disposed to deny to Garrick the merit of being an admirer of Shakespeare. A true lover of his excellences he certainly was not. For would any true lover of them have admitted into his matchless scenes such ribald trash as Tate and Cibber and the rest of them, that, with their darkness durst affront his light, have voiced it into the acting plays of Shakespeare? I believe it impossible that he could have had a proper reverence for Shakespeare, and have condescended to go through that interpolated scene in Richard III., in which Richard tries to break his wife's heart by telling her he loves another woman, and says, if she survives this, she is immortal. Yet I doubt not he delivered this vulgar stuff with as much anxiety of emphasis as any of the genuine parts, and for acting it is as well calculated as any. But we have seen the parts of Richard lately produce great fame to an actor by his manner of playing it, and it lets us into the secret of acting and of popular judgments of Shakespeare derived from acting. Not one of the spectators who have witnessed Mr. C.'s exertions in that part, but has come away with the proper conviction that Richard is a very wicked man, and kills little children in their beds, with something like the pleasure which the giant and ogres in children's books are represented to have taken in their practice. Moreover, that he is very close and shrewd and devilish cunning, for you could see that by his eye. But is in fact this the impression we have in reading the Richard of Shakespeare? Do we feel anything like disgust, as we do at that butcher-like representation of him that passes for him on the stage? A horror at his crimes blends with the affect which we feel, but how is it qualified, how is it carried off, by the rich intellect which he displays, his resources, his wit, his buoyant spirit, his vast knowledge and insight into characters, the poetry of his part, not an atom of all which is made perceivable in Mr. C.'s ways of acting it. Nothing but his crimes, his actions, is visible. They are prominent and staring. The murderer stands out, but where is the lofty genius, the man of vast capacity, the profound, the witty, accomplished Richard? The truth is, the characters of Shakespeare are so much the objects of meditation rather than of interest or curiosity as to their actions, that while we are reading any of his great criminal characters, Macbeth, Richard, even Iago, we think not so much of the crimes which they commit as of the ambition, the aspiring spirit, the intellectual activity which prompts them to relieve those moral offences. Barnwell is a wretched murderer. There is a certain fitness between his neck and the rope. He is a legitimate heir to the gallows. Nobody who thinks at all can think of any alleviating circumstances in his case to make him a fit object of mercy. Or to take an instance from the higher tragedy, what else but a mere assassin is Glenalvon? Do you think of anything but of the crime which he commits, and the wreck which he deserves? That is all which we really think about him. Whereas in corresponding characters in Shakespeare so little do the actions comparatively affect us, that while the impulses, the inner mind, in all its perverted greatness, solely assumes real and is exclusively attended to, the crime is comparatively nothing. But when we see these things represented, the acts which they do are comparatively everything. Their impulse is nothing. The state of sublime emotion into which we are elevated with those images of night and horror which Macbeth is made to utter, that solemn prelude with which he entertains the time till the bell shall strike which is to call him to murder Duncan. When we no longer read it in a book, when you have given up that vantage ground of abstraction which reading possesses over seeing, and come to see a man in his bodily shape before our eyes, actually preparing to commit a murder, if the acting be true and impressive, as I have witnessed it in Miss Kay's performance of that part, the painful anxiety about the act, the natural longing to prevent it, while it yet seems unperpetrated, the too close pressing semblance of reality, give a pain and an uneasiness which totally destroy all the delight which the words in the book convey, where the deed doing never presses upon us with a painful sense of presence. It rather seems to belong to history, to something past and inevitable, if it has anything to do with time at all.